Good evening. Welcome to the City Chambers. Today is September 19th, 2019. It is 6:03 p.m. We're in the City Chambers, and I call the City Commission special meeting to order. Those present with me are Commissioner Luke, Vice Mayor McDowell, myself, Mayor Hanks, Commissioner Carasone, Commissioner Emmerich. We have our City Manager Lear. We have our Assistant City Attorney Golan. We have our City Clerk, Ms. Taylor, and Ms. Goodman is Goodwin. Goodman, that's what I thought. All right. And Ms. Goodman, Ohio, is here as our recording secretary. Just a couple of reminders. We have public comments. Once we hit public comments, we're done taking public comments. So if you need a public comment card, they're right over here. And I do believe, do we have some overflow, Mr. Lear?
Yes, so there's room 244 is filled with people, and there's people in the lobby as well.
All right, so, yeah, so for those of you in room 244 that are listening and watching, if you have a public comment card, let's go ahead and get them to us. As I call these out, I will give a little bit of time for you guys to get here.
Is there anyone in the room 244 to
Yes.
help them with finding
Fire
cards?
chief, I believe, just
Okay.
ran out the door to go check and see if they have any.
All right, so while they are doing that, so that is where you get them right over here. You'll come over here and you'll speak and you'll state your name for the record. Please do me a favor and either turn off your cell phones or put them on vibrate so that way they don't disrupt the service. And just for your knowledge, this chamber is very loud, so even a normal voice out there makes it very difficult for us to hear up here, just because of the acoustics. So, but with that, if we would please, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And if I could have Mr. Golan lead that.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's kind of cool having everybody in the room and hearing that.
I know that.
That was cool.
Okay, guys, I'm slow walking a little bit because I know the chief is looking for some of those comment cards. If I can get an approval of the agenda, please.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Luke, seconded by Vice Mayor. Let's take the vote. And that is approved unanimously. So now we are going to move on to public comment. Now, in order of time, we are going to do public comment at the beginning of the meeting and after the meeting. The very last thing we do will be public comment. So I have a couple of folks here that have 2 comment cards. So either we can squeeze them in. I have Mr. Doman and Mr. Shaughnessy. If we can either squeeze them in the first 3 minutes, both of them, or we can do one up front and then one at the very end. So, Mr. Dobrin, how would you like to do that? Would you want to do them all up front in the 3 minutes you have, or do you want to put one in the front and one in the back?
I will reserve the right to speak twice. I will use 6 minutes. It's upstairs. It's about 200 at the end.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Shaughnessy? Oh, okay, wonderful. Okay. Okay, so let us begin. Mr. Dobrin, Mr. Shaughnessy, and Mr. Richardson, Donald Richardson.
Victor Dobrin, Real Circle. With liberty and justice for all. You are the hired and elected to be the custodians of our city. You had plenty of input at the last meeting, and you know from the messages you received that the financial strength of this city is not where you can have double-digit increases and have the same thing rolling next year on multiple elements which are taxing our citizens. Please do not blame the citizens that were not at the workshop. People have their own problems. You are entrusted with their public trust, and you should be accountable. Without going too many details that we have exchanged information about the meetings as well as on the last weeks, I would like you to be pragmatic tonight. Impose a millage increase rate that is not more than 2% of inflation rate, and send back to the city manager in the next 7 days with the department heads, and come back with a plan which meets the 3.6 millions that you added to be covered by the increase in millage rate. And as a first step, you can cut your commissioner personal discretionary expenses to $60,000 for this year. And if you deserve it next year, we can increase it. So that's $0.1 million, 100,000. Freeze all hirings. Aim at currently open positions and should curtail adding the 19 position you have in the budget, a net impact of $1.9 million. And we value the work of firefighters of the police. However, we have 7 positions for police, 5 coming from the public school security. Put it in the open position, don't hire. You already had in the last year budget for West Villages 4 heads. Divest the aquatic center. Here you can make a big pause. Instead of settling the people of Northport with a 1.5 project, which the people of Northport, by a referendum on November the 2nd, 2010, rejected, find a partner to operate it independently, and put 1 month of financing those people you hired, which not all of them are accounted into the budget properly, and stop these losses. We cannot carry the burden of $1 million a year after year. So if you add that those big picture numbers, they come to I did say another one, curtail merit increase it to 3%. Not
you,
all
Mr.
people
Dobrin.
deserve a 4%.
Thank you, Mr.
No.
Dobrin. Mr. Shennessy?
You're pretty close, it's Shaughnessy.
Shaughnessy. Sorry about that.
That's all right, my kids deal with it too. I'm not going to repeat everything that Victor said, but I think the audience,
Please state your name for the record.
Kevin Shaughnessy, sorry, Grand Paradiso, in the West Villages. Victor noted a couple of items that were sent to the commissioners to consider as part of your conversations. I know the last meeting it wasn't left in a condition that everybody was happy about. The room wasn't as crowded as it is tonight, and that gives you some indication of how unhappy people are with some of the decisions being made. I think to the point of your fiscal responsibility, we need to do a better job going forward. This year's behind the curtain, so to speak, from a input from the residents, but a much better job has to be done on explaining the budget process, explaining your revenue streams, explaining your expenses, sharing return on investments. I sure as hell would like to see the return on investment from the aquatic center. $12 million, and we're going to lose $500,000 a year or $400,000 plus a year. Where was the return on investment analysis? What external organizations have you brought in to do a process review and a staffing review? People like A.T. Carney, Gartner Group, Price Waterhouse. Yes, they can be a little expensive, but I can assure you they'll find things that you probably haven't even thought about looking at. And it's money well spent. You guys are not subject matter experts, and that's not an insult. That's a fact. So you should be going to the people that can help us and help the organization and help the city. They can come in here, they can take a look at things and say, well, you really don't need to do that, maybe do this differently, or start doing something else. There are tons of organizations that are available that can help you guys do a much better job. And I think the communications is key, it's crucial. The people need input into this process. They need to understand it better. A lot of people don't, and they shouldn't really have to. They should be trusting that the right thing's going to get done. But based on the number of people here and the conversations going back and forth to the commission, clearly we have to do a much better job. Right? You have a little board up there earlier with a whole bunch of comments on it, and one that caught me was working together. We can help make sure that in Northport we can achieve anything. So we're here to help get something done. Now it's your job to get it done, and to get it done properly and get it done without pain. I understand there's some things that have to be done, there's collective bargaining, but there are things that we should be looking at, and we should be looking at not just the millage rate, but all of the spend in the city. I don't care where the revenue's coming from. If it's going to be money being spent in the city, quite extent, not to pick on it, but at the end of the day, yeah, that wasn't part of the property tax, but it sure as hell is now, because that shortage is coming directly out of the property taxes. So this is a direct charge to the community. So we need to do a much better job at explaining why we're doing things. $1.3 million for a city hall renovation. Do we really need to do that? So, there are things that... My time is up. I'll catch up with you folks.
Thank you,
at the
Mr.
back.
Shaughnessy.
Thank you.
If we continue with the outburst, we will take a couple of breaks. If we continue, we will have to clear the room. We have to do business. Mr. Donald Richard, just stop the outbreaks. Let's be adults here. Donald Richardson, Mary Ann Novak, and, I'm sorry, Vinny Mahas? Mr. Richardson? Mr. Donald Richardson?
He might be coming.
Okay, there he is.
Coming in
Yep,
from the
that's all
back.
right. I forgot we had overflow. Thank you for reminding me.
She can come over and
Yes, you can.
Speaking for myself only, I'm not
Please
so
state
much
your name for the
interested.
record.
I'm sorry?
Please state your name for the
Oh,
record.
Donald Richardson, live here in Northport.
Yep.
I'm not so interested in this year's budget, but I'm concerned about going forward, what we're going to do going forward. And what I'd like to see is everything contracted out whenever possible. I'd like to see a robust volunteer fire department, auxiliary police, and if it's garbage collection or lawn care, I'd like to see that contracted out, laid low, or maybe a local person. And, but most of all, I'd like to see an aggressive annexation of more territory. Because what we have now, it's all platted out for a couple 100,000 houses, and I don't want to redo it. I think if we had more land, we could bring in more industry, jobs, and that would diversify the tax base. And that would generate the additional revenue I think we'd like to have. I don't want to see a commission penny punching, penny pinching every little dime and everything. But that's what I like to see. I'd like to see especially aggressive annexation of more territory. And I mentioned Columbus, Ohio example. And in Columbus, Ohio is a very successful city, and they aggressively annexed. The other cities in Ohio were boxed in by the they incorporated, the urban areas, incorporated. And then they had no room to expand, and then they didn't work together. But if we, and I know it's, Northport's already one of the largest areas in the state, but I'd just like to see more annexation, aggressive, and then bring in more industry to diversify the tax base and generate additional income. And that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson.
Thank you.
Ms. Novak, and then Mr.
Thank you.
Mahas.
Mary Ann Novak, West Villages, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Island Walk. Commissioners, can you see the overflow in this room? Can you see the people outside in the next room? And do you get the message? I relocated here from Connecticut. The reason I moved from Connecticut was, guess what? Taxes. And I feel like I went from the frying pan into the fire. I have never witnessed an increase like this. And I don't think that you are considering your constituents who voted you in. So, constituents, remember our voice when it comes time to vote. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. That was much better. Mr. Mahas, and then Joan Cassay and Joe Cato.
Vincent Mejias, just going to make it short. I totally disagree with the raise. Vincent Mejias, I just want to voice my opinion. I totally disagree with the tax increases. That'll be it.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Cassay.
Yes, hi, Joan Cassay. Good evening. I was at the last meeting. It's my first time meeting all of you. I'm from New Jersey, and I was hoping to come to this state and not deal with what I dealt with back there. But unfortunately, I think I moved maybe to the wrong town. I'm not sure. but I'm hoping that changes. At the last meeting, my impression was there were two individuals on this panel who were willing to put ideas forth in hopes that others on this panel would agree with them to go back and work on certain items. But they were talking on deaf ears. Now, everyone in this room knows who those people are. And again, we will vote. So I hope that you listen to everybody tonight, and I agree with everybody has said so far, and that you compromise on items. What I feel is that some of you are invested personally in certain items in this budget on projects going forth, and that's fine, but I think you need to think of every citizen, and do they have the same thoughts that you do? But it seems as though everyone on this panel has a different thought on where the money should go. When are you going to come together and decide, hey, these are the two most important items on this list that need to get done this year? And compromise. We need to get along. Okay? I agree that the Aquatic Center is going to run at a $740,000 deficit this year. Do we have to open it this year? Can we wait? Can we wait another year or two? Or can we open it on a part-time basis? Did you think of that? Can we open it maybe 1 week out of the month so that the children can enjoy it until we build up the revenue to afford it on a full-time basis? I think that you should put a freeze on new employees for the town and maybe consolidate some of the work duties, maybe give the people who consolidate the jobs maybe a little better pay raise, but not have to hire 19 more people when you're adding health costs, pension costs, and your healthcare costs have gone up 10% this year, and every year they're going to do the same thing. We have to remember that. What else? Overall crime, in the city manager's letter on September of 2018, said that overall crime was down 6%. Now, we all love the protection of our police officers. We all respect you. We want to keep our officers happy, and we want to be safe. Do you have the statistics that we truly need to hire that many new officers? Would we be in danger if we didn't hire as many new officers? Or is this just a proposal? Because I feel pretty safe here, but I wouldn't want to put anybody in danger. But I would like to see more paperwork on that.
Thank you,
That
Ms.
really
Cassay.
says that.
Thank you, Ms. Cassay. Mr. Cato, Mr. Tim Ritchie, and Ms. Caroline Price. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Joe Caeto.
Caeto.
C-A-E-T-T-O.
Thank you.
I've been living in Northport for 20 years. When I came down here, the lawnmowers were cutting the grass in the streets. Now, a 30% increase is quite an increase. I mean, I could understand maybe 3%, you know? But I'm like the young lady that just spoke. I moved here where taxes were getting really bad up north where I was from. I think maybe you could cut some of your budget with people that are intelligent and volunteers. You know, they already have retirements. A lot of people that would volunteer, that'd be a big savings. I mean, just like this whole board. This whole board could be volunteers. You know? And I'm serious. And I got 55 years with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. And I know what things happen. And I'm from Washington, D.C., and I've been around a little bit, and I see that Congress, if you follow the way the Congress is doing, we're going to be in big trouble. And I just can't agree with this kind of increase for anybody. I'm on fixed income, and I know a lot of my friends are too. So if we're not going to be able to have an increase in income, we can't afford to keep this going. You know, I mean, believe me. I mean, I see a lot of people here, I mean, I would be willing to volunteer for your job. For free. I mean, you know what I mean? Something to think about. Good luck.
Thank you.
I'm gonna be probably moving out.
Mr. Ritchie, Ms. Caroline Price, and Mr. Corey Chadwick. Please state your name for the records.
Tim Ritchie, resident of Punta Gorda Isles, and I'm also the founder of March Against Mosaic. I would like to first say good evening, everybody. I was thinking about my grandfather, Lieutenant David Cleo Ritchie. He resides in Column K in Arlington National Cemetery, along with my father. I've been here a few times, and I'm about to speak about something very important. On Monday, September 30th, in Mulberry, there will be a hearing on the Bartow Chemical plant. This plant, for every 1 ton of phosphate, a fertilizer it produces 5 tons of phosphogypsum waste. They say it's slightly radioactive. The applicant, Mosaic Fertilizer LLC, seeks to renew permit number FL0001589 to discharge non-contact process and treated process wastewater from cooling tower blowdown within the plant, from phosphoric acid production and from the phosphogypsum stack system. Outfall D001 discharges nearly continuously daily in an average of 0.297 million gallons per day into the Skin Sapling Creek, which flows into the North Prong Alfeo River. The Alfeo River in Hillsborough Bay, Tampa Bay, north of us. Outfall D002 discharges continuously every day an average of 2.69 million gallons into the Peace River in Charlotte Harbor. Both Tampa Bay and Charlotte Harbor are protected by the National Estuary Programs, and both Alfeo and Peace River are the source of drinking water for multiple counties. In addition to outfalls D001 and D002, South Bartow's operation also has an internal outfall that discharges untreated waste from the phosphogypsum stack slopes into the Peace River. We bathe and shower in this river, the water every day from that river. I hear all this about taxes. I had my first march on December 1st, 2018. It is because of July 24th, a Mosaic DeSoto County BOCC meeting to rezone 18,000 acres that are precious to provide safety to the river and to the citizens. I am going to ask that some representatives please come. Thank you as always for your time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Ms. Caroline Price, Mr. Corey, Carolyn? Oh, Carolyn, sorry. Carolyn Price, Corey Chadwick, and John Meisel. Go ahead and state your name for the record, ma'am.
Carolyn Price, L-Y-N, not Caroline. I'm here because of the tax increase. Most of us, if we have a cost of living increase, it's about 3%. Not all of us are lucky enough to have that. A 25% tax increase is 8 times our cost of living increase. That's criminal. Shame on you. Shame on you. We trusted you to be stewards of our money. You should have known about these other items that are necessary. Police officers, their vehicles, fire department. Now we have the infrastructure for our waterways that is crumbling. Why was there not money put aside for these things a long time ago? Why are not savings put aside? This is not fiscally responsible behavior. No private business would ever have built that water park knowing that it would run at a deficit for how many years? If you think we're upset, we get homeowners exemption. Wait till the snowbirds come down, and they don't have that, homeowners. I'm not staying in Northport. I'm planning on leaving. I can move to Sarasota, have less taxes, not pay city taxes, and do much better. If you think that this is the only amount of people that are upset about, you're sadly mistaken. I'm sure you know that for every one person that is here, there are at least another 10 people that are upset. So figure this out. Like I said, shame on you. We trusted you with our money, and you're not fiscally responsible.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, that's it. That's it. The next time we're going to take a break, and then at some point I will clear the room. Mr. Corey Chadwick, Mr. John Meisel, I believe, and Paul Kale. Please state your
Yes,
name.
Corey Chadwick from Grand Paradiso. I have a statement and then 2 quick questions. My statement is, I'm appalled that you'd even consider the kind of increase in property tax rate that you're looking at. That's unbelievable. My first question, do law enforcement officers have a choice of whether they accept a vehicle or not? Can anyone answer that?
Staff will get with you after your stuff.
You don't know the answer?
No, staff will get with you. This is not a question and answer time. Go ahead, sir.
So you don't know whether that's added to their salary either?
You got 2 minutes and 25
Yeah,
seconds.
thanks.
Thank you. John Meisel and Paul Kale and Joe Watkowski. Please state your name for the record, sir.
Hi, good evening, John Meisel. I'm a new resident here. I think most of you may know my name from the social media site, but as that I'm new, I've been doing a little bit of digging, 3,000-foot cursory, trying to understand what's going on. I had the pleasure of meeting with Mr. Lear on Monday to discuss some of those talking points. What I am appalled at is the wasteful spending and lack of fiscal responsibility that's being demonstrated with this increase and proposed millage to the taxpayers. I'll give you an example. 5 resource officers, part of that department, were no longer required because of Sarasota County taking those positions over. What you may or may not know, Mr. Lear is aware of this, is that the police chief, instead of him assigning them to vacancies that he currently has within his ranks, he created 5 new positions on top of the 161 that were approved last year. Is he allowed to do that? Who's paying for that? Us, the taxpayers. I consider that wasteful and lack of fiscal responsibility. Not only that, there's the vehicles that go along with those individuals. He could have taken them and assigned them to the 4 new hires that want to be added next year to support West Villages, which in the budget includes 4 new vehicles. However, you're using that as a talking point to justify the increase in the millage, when in fact West Villages provided the city of Northport $523,000 in April of this year that is represented in the receivable revenues for the city. It's two-sided. You can't have it two-sided. Let's talk about budgeting. The budgets that you have were built, or just look at impact fees, for example. The impact fees for new construction are every year from 19 to projected are supposed to go down. Is that based upon a lack of construction? Because they implemented an increase of 75% to impact fees from $3,200 to $5,600 July 12th. When I look at July from 18 to July 19, there's a difference of 5 number of permits issued. But that's increased revenue that's not reflected. You can't be conservative on your revenues and exorbitant on your expenditures and justify it, use that to justify your increase in millages. It's just not fair. And these taxpayers are here and they know, and I'm going to keep digging and keep socializing until we get an army out here to make sure that this never happens again if it does happen. And I hope you all hear me and understand that I'm serious about this. And I want to thank everyone that's here for your support. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Paul Kale, Joe Watkowski, Connie Bruni, and Phil Stokes. Please state your name for the record, sir.
Paul Kale, I live in West Villages. At the last meeting that we had on this subject, Ms. McDowell came around and talked to all of us, soliciting speakers. And I asked who represented my district. And thinking there's 5 commissioners, there's 5 districts. And she said, no, we represent all of you. It's not done like that. Each and every one of you represents all of us. I'd like you to think about that very carefully, because all of us are not happy with that representation. The proposed millage rate increase obviously is angering, it's unacceptable, and to people on fixed incomes, it's frightening. To many of us, consider this for instance. Commissioner McDowell at the last meeting repeatedly alluded to more projects unfunded in the future, that we have to control expenses now so that we have money for those unfunded projects in the future. I don't know what they are, I haven't done that research, but are you going to come back to us next year with another double-digit request for millages to pay for those projects? If you look at what's been going on with the tax base, it's been going up at double-digit rates. If you look at the amount of money that's coming in off of that tax base, it's been going up 9, 10, 12%. You would think that that much money coming in with the millage rate where it was would be sufficient to cover the growth in the city that we need to see as far as additional headcount, things of that nature. But apparently not. Apparently we need a whole lot more money. This millage rate is by far the highest in 10 years, way higher than anything we've seen in 10 years. None of us saw this coming. None of us were able to plan for it. It's made us all of our lives difficult, especially those of us on fixed incomes. And lastly, I suppose, how would you possibly solve some of this? One way would be to freeze hiring, just freeze hiring. That alone saves a chunk of the money that we're talking about. Another thing that could be, and this is my experience, having been in a number of different municipalities, there's no government or bureaucracy, to my experience, that is cost-effective or efficient. They're a necessary evil so that we can have safety, we can have police, we can have fire. We need these things. But in no way, shape, or form are they ever cost-effective or efficient. Which in turn means when you get involved in things like an aquatic park and the mineral water thing, that's something that no private sector government should ever get, no public sector should ever get involved in. You're not equipped to do it. You need to be out of it. You need to get rid of it, and you need to give it to people who can handle it.
Mr. Paul Kale, Joe Wachowski, and Ms. Connie Bruni. Oh, sorry. No, sorry. I forgot to put your card over to the side. Mr. Wachowski, thank you.
Thank you. Joe Wachtowski, 5009 Kingsley Road. Death and taxes. 2 centuries ago, we had one of our founding fathers who mentioned that. Death and taxes, the only 2 things in life that you can count on. And had old Ben Franklin, who supposedly penned that statement, ever seen the tax rate that was posed here, I think he would have dropped dead on the spot. He would have gotten both altogether. Look, people obviously do not like this tax rate, and I agree with them. Many of the people came here for lower taxes. Many of the people cannot afford this. That's why they came here. Really, I've talked to a lot of people who just can't afford such a tax rate. It's not fair, and I'll tell you, if coming from my daytime job, where I came from before, I had a very responsible job. If I'd ever proposed anything like this, I would have been, A, fired on the spot, possibly brought up on usury charges. If you don't know what that is, look it up. And I would have been accused of non-due diligence, which I'm going to accuse you of. You have not shown due diligence in your responsibilities. You have to handle your finances better, guys. If you want some advice, there are people out there, as been proposed before, who can give you that advice. I came down here to retire, so I'm not going to give you the advice. There's plenty of it out there. Well, I'm giving you some now, I guess. But in any case, I'm not going to take up a lot of time, but you can tell people aren't happy about this. I'd like to leave you, I started with a comment from old Ben Franklin about death and taxes. I'll leave you with another sort of story from his time. You know, the British didn't believe that we'd get upset about taxes either. They were wrong. Thank you.
Mr. Phil Stokes, Mr. David Samuel.
There's one for you, and there's one for the manager and the attorney as well. Ladies and gentlemen, howdy. It's been a while since I've been here. My name is Connie Bruni. I'm a Northport taxpayer. If you wanted to get people's attention, I think you did so. Yeah. What I have to say to you is because you can increase the millage rate doesn't necessarily mean you should. Certainly not at this level. As someone who served as an elected official, I cannot fathom that any elected person can justify a one-year tax increase exceeding 25%. I presented you and passed out to you 6 properties in Northport in which I have a ownership interest. In each and every case, with no change in the assessed value, because you have to compare an apple and an apple, the millage increase exceeds 25% from Northport only, not any other portion of my tax bill. I brought all the tax bills with me. If anybody wants to look at it, I can do the math for you. Been doing this a long time. CPI for the last 12 months was 1.8%. Consumer Price Index, 1.8%. Come on. This doesn't compute. There's no way this proposed increase is justifiable. And truthfully, sorry, Pete, no response, but with the city manager, who used to be our finance director, I was pretty shocked to see that. I have to be quite honest. I commend Commissioner McDowell, who came out front earlier to talk to folks as we were arriving for this meeting. Conversely, the concept that because we didn't attend a meeting previously, or a town hall, or a workshop, or whatever, that somehow discounts our opinion is rude and it is wrong. I will not accept that. Am I angry? You bet I am. Remember, 2 female commissioners on this dais who didn't take me seriously in 2016. They were voted out of office. In 2016, I was alone in my effort, ABCD. I'm guessing if I mounted a similar effort today, I'd have 2 rooms full of people willing to help me, to educate voters in this community with regard to the facts I just gave you. I'd call that a strong voice, the voice of the people of Northport. I appreciate them. I say to you, go back to the drawing board, reassess needs versus wants. I understand wants, I get it, but sometimes, just like we do at home, we have to tighten the belt and say, we want this, but we need this, and this is all that we can afford. Otherwise, there is a consequence to poor choice.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Phil Stokes, Mr. David Samuel, Ruth Thurber, and Ivy Perfilis. Please state your name for the record, sir.
My name's Phil Stokes. I reside in Grand Paradiso and have for the past 2 years. Having attended the September 5th board meeting regarding the proposed millage tax, having read completely the city's vision plan, last year's 2019 budget, and the proposed 2020 budget, I find it astounding that our commissioners of a city with a total budget of $177 million, which includes almost $20 million of millage tax on our real estate, invested only 40 to 50 hours in workshops with our town manager and his people, making sure our tax dollars have been spent responsibly. As an accountant by education, working over 40 years in numerous financial capacities, having prepared and reviewed over 500 budgets in my career, I find this totally inadequate and fiscally irresponsible. 40 to 50 hours of due diligence could not begin to scratch the surface of the time required to investigate and push back on each city department's budget submissions. I appreciate it's the town manager's job to prepare with his staff the budget and to run the city government, but it's your job to see they do so in a fiscally responsible manner, in a way that balances our city's needs with a reasonable tax rate that has public acceptability. You're the caretakers and the trustees of our tax dollars. After years of not adequately adjusting the millage rate to keep pace with the city's needs due to political and developer influence, you now seek to whack all the Northport taxpayers with an outrageous increase in 1 year. With the projected homeowner growth over the next 5 years in Northport, with thousands of new taxpaying homeowners contributing millions to the tax coffers, in addition to the increased tax revenues from retail and commercial growth coming to support the city's growing consumer population, you should be able to gradually spread some of the proposed 2020 budget expenses over those years. By holding spending growth to responsible and essential levels going forward, costs should not grow dollar for dollar with new tax revenues and should serve to keep the millage rate below 4.0 for years to come, while still providing those service levels recommended in this budget, but phase in over the next 3 to 5 years rather than hitting us all in 1 year. I'm sure you realize the vast majority of Northport residents believe you should not approve the proposed millage rate and instead should go back to work and do your jobs. We challenge you folks to dig into this budget and find a way to get the rate down well below 4.0 level to a rate that's fair and reasonable. And finally, I'd also suggest that going forward, the commission consider adding a new budget advisory board comprised of 5 volunteer city residents to meet with the city manager and the commission monthly to provide citizen oversight and bridge the knowledge and communications disconnect regarding the annual budget process between our citizenry and our government. Thank you for the allotted 3 minutes to share my thoughts and opinions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. David Samuel, Ms. Ruth Thurber, and Ivy Perfley. Mr.
Okay, I'm David Samuel. I'm a resident of Northport. And thank you, Commission and staff members, and this great turnout. I really appreciate it. Most evenings, you have 10 people in this room. Workshops, 2 or 3. So I'm glad to see this. First of all, I'm glad to see that you're going to have a town hall meeting with the West Villages in November, I believe. And one of the items you're going to discuss, or you propose to discuss, I don't know if it's finalized, is, of course, City Government 101. And there's a lot of things I heard up here that are great ideas, but really they can't work within the frame of how this government's set up, believe it or not. This is a city manager form of government. You might want to go on the website and they explain city manager form of government. They tell you how commissioners are selected, all about them, the city manager and the staff members, the deputy clerk, the clerk, and other people up here. So it's very important you look at that because a lot of people miss that. The other thing is, we know why this is happening. In the West Village Sun, which you all got Thursday on your doorsteps, there was a comment, not a quote, so the gentleman can correct us later on. Mayor Chris Hanks contends the rate increase is due because the city has artificially held tax rates low over the past several years. That was a comment, not a quote, and that was in your West Village Sun received today. Here are some other things. I'm hoping during the budgeting process, there is a process they have to follow by state law. They have to get their budget done by a certain date. They usually call in their department heads and the commissioners sit down and go over each line item. But I'm hoping they did the following: met the prioritized spending on these line item things by saying things like must have, should have, and would like to have, and sort of break that all down. And if there was a set figure, like 20% cuts needed, use that figure. Some other things. And this one might make some people go boo, but there's some underused parks in Northport. Close them, maintain them, but close them down temporarily till things get better. Also, offer employees early buyouts. What this does, it gets rid of a lot of these perks like insurance, retirement. Buy people out early, give them a little incentive to do that. That's used a lot in other governments. Another thing to do is, if you have retirees that came from the city government that were in specialized offices, hire them back. Thank you very much. I have more and more, but I don't.
Thank you, Mr. Samuel. Ms. Thurber and Ms. Perkins.
I'm Ruth Thurber from West Villages. Allow me to provide a little bit of history based on my research from what I've learned over the last few weeks as I'm following this fiasco. In February 2013, Butler Park Aquatic Facility History Memo provided details, and that memo is online, that on November 2nd in 2010, a bond referendum for regional water park, which included a 25-meter park, was voted down by the residents of the community. 7 days later, on November 9th in 2010, a special meeting occurred, and the commission at that time directed to move forward with a 50-meter pool. In April 2012, final plans, which included a 25-meter pool, were submitted, and our mayor became the mayor in 2016. In June of 2018, Northport City Commissioner, I don't know what's funny, excuse me.
He wasn't the mayor in 2016.
Well, he was on the commission in 2016. Forgive me, I don't see humor in that. In 2018, the Northport City Commission broke ground on a $12 million aquatic center that included a 25-meter pool. Against voter wishes, we now have a 25-meter pool. Since early this evening, I appreciate Commissioner McDowell coming out. She was the only commissioner that came out to speak to us. I've learned that I wondered what paid for that pool. The money came out of our surtax, and apparently that's allowed for one-time capital expenditure. I hope I'm stating that correctly. It really makes me wonder how many other capital expenditures that the voters might have accepted would have fit into that bill rather than funding a pool that the residents didn't want. I know I'm running out of time. I've been writing the mayor, and it's just going down the tubes. And I have in quotes from my emails, and I'm happy to share with anybody, that he states I'm living up to the promise not to speak out of both sides of my mouth. I have always put the truth first. He also told me today that I was cherry-picking the issues. No, I'm not cherry-picking the issues. And Mayor Hanks also said in writing at around noon today that the pool has no basis and no bearing on our tax rate. I stand corrected if I have misinformation. What frightens me most is that I understand by going online that Mayor Hanks has expressed interest in becoming a Sarasota County Commissioner, or the commission there, whatever. It frightens me to think of the damage that he's done. He has not done his due diligence. He stated in writing to me that the pool has never gone for a referendum vote. He needs to do his due diligence. Thank you very much.
Ms. Perkins. Ms. Perkins.
My name is Ivy Pierflis. I've been in Northport about 15 years. I moved from Naples, where my taxes were lower than they are here. You're discriminating. Oh, that's true. I can prove it. I was in a condo there for 30-something years. You are discriminating against seniors on fixed incomes. Northport is paying employees more than the norm of the average resident. The 30% of residents in Northport are seniors. But I assume you want to be a children's paradise, paid for with our taxes. There are many pleas for our population. And what was the cop doing on 75 looking for a dog at 2:30 in the morning? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, we're going to move on to our public hearings. Ordinance number 2019-40. City Clerk, please read this ordinance by title only.
of the City of Northport, Florida, providing for certification and adoption of an ad valorem millage rate for the 2019-20 fiscal year, providing for levying and assessment, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, and providing an effective date. Section 2, levying and assessment. 2.01. There is hereby levied and assessed a tax on all taxable property, real and personal, within the corporate limits of the City of Northport, Florida, except homestead exemptions as defined in Article 10 of the Constitution of the State of Florida as amended. It is now or shall be provided for by general law as follows. For the general government appropriation for operating expenses and expenditures contained in Ordinance Number 2019-41, a tax millage of 4.0872, which represents a 27.59% increase over the rolled back millage rate of 3.2034.
Thank you, ma'am. City Manager, your presentation, sir. You want to present the item?
Thank you, Mayor. What this is, the adopted millage rate. As you know, we've had, the Commission adopted a maximum millage rate back on July 23rd, which was what you cannot exceed, which was 4.2787. Subsequent to that, we presented you with a millage rate of first reading 2 weeks ago of 4.2056. The Commission at that meeting lowered that millage rate to what is being presented to you tonight, which is 4.0872. With that, we'll take any comments you have.
Thank you. Okay, I want to remind the board that this is Commission floor, and you have 8 minutes. The floor is yours, Commissioner Luke.
Actually, I'm very thankful for the lapse in time from last meeting to this one, so we could crunch numbers more. I know Finance did a great job trying to crunch as we were speaking during that meeting, but I think we have a little more clearer numbers to look at this point in time. But I want to, Commission, take you back to before you were elected and even put on this board. Other commissions were here, and back in the early 2000s, this city was booming like crazy. I mean, it was just unreal, busting at the seams. And then that recession hit. And the staffing is getting back to where it was before the recession because they scaled back everything and went to a skeleton staffing. After the recession lifted and things started to ease, the commissions prior to this one still didn't address the needs within the city as far as the staffing and that went. They were understaffed. I mean, here's 25,000 more people and still running on that skeleton crew. And past commissions would be leaving and they'd be going, phew. Boy, we got rid of that bullet, and by not doing anything. By the time this commission got in, and you guys were here before I was, the morale in this city was absolutely atrocious. We were losing firefighters and policemen left and right. We had new hires that were coming in and were making as much or more than some of the established, so we went ahead and had a wage study done. I remember we wanted the quality of the city to be high. And so when we set out to have the wage study done, we said, bring it back showing, the various ranges of mid and high and stuff. And we were so far off with the wages that the employees were being paid that instead of a higher quality, we're like, nope, give us the middle of the road. And so adjustments were made. Last year was the first year that we had a full year of those wages. Actually, I mean, when the study came back, it was about $2.5 million that we were adding to the budget because of those wages. Just trying to get the city where it needed to be, and actually I was proud of it. We are a service industry. Everything that we do is attached to our staff, and and our staff is great. And the morale came back. We are a place where, I mean, we opened all of the contracts, 3 contracts, went through all of those. And the morale is so different in this place. And I'm proud of our city and our staff and what they do. So we needed that fixed. And we did it. But what we did wasn't reflected in that budget. That is where the millage was left the same last year instead of reflecting the changes that this commission voted on to do. And when we voted on it, we knew it was going to adjust the millage, but we said go ahead and do it anyhow. And then it was hidden, you know, within the budget. It was left the same. And so you come now this year, we've got the city as a whole running, but we left aside West Village. They're growing. They needed the same level of service that the rest of the city did, so the fire and the police needed to be out there. So we expanded again the personnel and the equipment for the personnel to get that level of service where it needed to be. So it ends up a $3 million change in the budget because of staff alone. $3 million in the budget equates to 0.6701 in millage. So if you go to that rollback of 3.2034 and you add just only the wages, you come up with a 38735. 3.8735. That is about a 13.5% over last year. It still leaves we were in the last meeting talking about reserves, and that reserve that we were talking about dipping into is the wiggle room for us to be able to still handle what in the budget meetings we went through, but that 5% staff couldn't deviate from that, but we can. So I think the service level of that $3 million adjustment to the staff is that. It's a service level. But I think everything else that this commission has done, including the aquatic center, needs to be paid for through that policy that we set. So I think it needs to come out of what we did and allow this rate to go down to the 3.8735 and that takes care of what should have been. I mean, actually, we should have been sitting at a 3.6 last year, and it would have been just a simple bump this year, but we didn't. It was held artificially down, and things were cut. Projects were put off, and we did last year what people are wanting this year, and you can't do it 2 years in a row. But we can change the policy that we put in place and pay for those things such as the aquatic center deficit through that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner McDowell, you have 8 minutes. The floor is yours.
So the board knows where I stand on this, this tax increase. I voted against it the entire meeting the last time we met because I don't know why.
Well, your paper was blocking the microphone.
Okay. So last meeting, I'll start over. The last meeting, I voted against all of the increases that were proposed. Because I firmly believe that if you have an increase in revenues, which we did in the valuations across the city, we also have an increase in inflation. We have an increase in salaries. We have an increase in benefits. Those have to be paid. We have to pay our employees. So other things then have to start looking at and being cut. And unfortunately, taxes are a way of life. We all realize that. Citizens understand that taxes have to be paid so that they can get the services that are rendered. And we all grumble about them, myself included. I don't like paying taxes, I don't like paying the fees, I don't like paying the assessments. But in the end, like you, I write that check with grumbled handwriting and mail off my tax bill, or tax payment. It's until we get a proposed increase of 23, 25, 28, 30%, whatever numbers you want to use, that we wake up a sleepy citizenry and have them jolt into action. I want to thank all of the citizens that are here. I especially want to thank the citizens that had the courage to speak. I am grateful. Regardless of what happens tonight, I hope to see y'all in June, because that's when the budget process starts. And I know over these past few weeks, I've heard a few commissioners and a few other people saying that we have the lowest tax rate in the area. It's not true. Not true at all. We have one of the highest tax rates when you take the millage rate and the assessments. The only one in the area that's higher than us is Charlotte County. Venice kept their tax rate the same as last year's. City of Sarasota kept their tax rate the same as last year's. Sarasota County, unincorporated Sarasota County, actually was able to lower just a smidgen their tax rate. I have to wonder, how can they do that? We're in the same general area. We basically have the same services. Outside of Sarasota County, we basically have the same valuations in properties. For Northport to have a 23% increase, it's unsustainable, guys. We have salaries that have to increase year over year. We have insurance that has to increase year over year. Inflation, general inflation, cost of doing business, you know, those stretchers cost money, gas prices keep going up, the cost of steel keeps going up. All of that comes into play. But our revenues have also gone up. And we cannot jeopardize the economic growth of our community. We keep saying we want development to come here. We want these big businesses to come here. We want more jobs. We want better paying jobs. I agree 100%. Raising taxes 20 to 30% in 1 year is not going to get that done. We have to look at spending. And I know it's hard, I know it's difficult to sit there and tell staff no. I know it's hard and I know it's difficult to say, hey, we have to wait till next year to do something when we really, really want to do it now. But next year, those salary increases are going to still come. We have a job to do, it's our responsibility, and I firmly believe that if we do not cut this proposed 4.0872 even lower, we are going to lose the trust of our citizens when we have to come back with these large bills that are coming because of our failing infrastructure. That's all I have.
Thank you. Come on, guys. Commissioner Emmerich.
Thank you all for being here. This has been my first official budget being on this board, and it's been a ride, let me tell you. The city manager went through and with the directors and everything, and they cut about $5 million out of it. We've had our budget meetings, and we probably cut another $1 million or more above that. But when it was proposed coming in at a 4.2%, I knew that was very drastically high. We're currently at a 3.4, and we can't stay there. So I started thinking, where can we end up here? What's middle ground? And I have to go back with Commissioner Luke on her statement, and we just got new numbers here the other day from the city manager on how it affects our reserves, because we can't deplete those either, because Look at what happened in the Bahamas recently. We have to have those reserves in place for the safety of our citizens. We are in a hurricane path. It can happen. I'm not saying it's going to, but what happens if it does hit? We have to have those reserves in place. I'm not saying we can't use them. We can use some of them, but anything that we use, we must replace. And that means next year. We're starting to take a process of being whole within the city, with our services, with our employees, with everything that we supply out there, and we do. We're starting to get back to where we need to be. That costs money. Police and fire, I believe it was stated before, they were jumping ship going elsewhere. And we didn't have that safety net. We didn't. But again, it's time to get back to the fairness. If you go from the 3.4 to the 4.2, that's a 0.8 mil increase. So what's fair? In my opinion, halfway is a good start. That would be basically your 3.8735, as Commissioner Luke had stated before. And I think that's give and take on both parts, to where the city gives, the taxpayer gives, because next year, if, let's say we stayed at the 3.4, are you prepared to go to a 4.4 or a 4.6 next year? Because that's what's going on. Everything is increasing in price. So do we do a little bit this year, and then a little bit next year, and a little bit the year after? That's proper planning. So, yes, cuts will be made. Cuts, we can see services coming and going and seeing what works and what doesn't work. That's where your cuts come from. Do you want to cut from the safety of your family? Do you want to cut your loved one's ability to be helped when needed? Is that where you want to make those cuts? Because if it adds up to $20 a month, and that's what your tax increase is, and you need an ambulance and they can't get there, are you going to live with yourself saying, well, I didn't pay that $20? Not me, not me. And I am not going to be the one to make that decision.
Hey, that's enough. No more talking out there. I'll start ushering people out.
This is my floor right now. The Aquatic Center, that I did not have a vote on. What I have right now is responsibility to keep it moving and to keep it working. Now, not saying that there aren't options coming up in the future. We haven't even opened it yet. We don't know what it's going to do. We have a projected deficit of $600,000. That's if not one person pays to go in that place. So let's be real about talking about deficits, because it could break even, it could be 100,000, it could be 500,000, it could be 750,000. We do not know those numbers, nor will we, till we actually have it open for 2 years to where we can take an average on that, to have those numbers. Everybody can project what they want, but that's not fact and that's not reality. So I'm inclined to go with the 3.8735. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Carson, you have 8 minutes. Floor is yours.
Thank you. City manager, what will happen if we went to 3.8735? We'll be using more out of our fund balance, correct?
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now, I'm looking at the fund balance, the updated sheet that you gave us. The reserve for contingency emergency disaster relief, it says 20%, but didn't we make it somewhere between 15 to 20%? Wasn't that what the policy stated?
The 20% that's the reserve for emergencies, and there's the 5%, 5 to 10% that is for sustainability and rate stabilization.
Okay, but didn't we have those in ranges, everything but the...
The 20% is a flat amount, and then the other one is 5 to 10%. So combined, it would be 25 to 30%.
Wait a second. The budget stabilization, oh, if it's 5% and if it's 10%. Okay, I got you now. I was reading it wrong. Okay, so the 5% is the 2 million, which would give us 4 million to use if we brought it down to 10%, the budget stabilization amount. How much would we have to use if we brought it down to the 5% versus the 10%? That's what I'm looking for.
So in order to get to the minimum of that range, the 5%, we are $172,000 short. based on the millage rate that was approved at first reading.
So you're saying we're under the 5% as it is? All right. And then what, the 20%, there was no range set in that particular.
That was just a flat
Right, that was just
20%
a
amount.
flat 20. But if I remember correctly, that was one of the things I was looking to get anywhere between the 15 to 20% range, but we couldn't get the board to agree to that. So if we go back and change that emergency, because isn't it a whole 25% that you have to hold in fund balance in order to be fiscally considered a rating bond? 25% is usually the average?
The 20% is what we need for the emergencies. The 5% is in order to have the rate stabilization. The bond agencies look at your fund balance policy, and first thing they do is look at it and see, A, are you spending reserves on a recurring basis? And B, are you within your own policy?
Right, all right. So my point being is that if we were to go back to the policy and we change that disaster relief fund to go between the 15 and 20%, and we use that extra 5% of that money, are we still going to come under it?
No, if you were to make it 15 and 5, then you'd be at the 20%. You would not be under it. My caution to you on that is
If we keep
if you
changing it,
continually
it's
change
gonna
your
be a
fund balance
problem.
policy
Right.
year after year, and this would be the third time it's been changed, that will be looked at negatively as well.
Right, but hopefully this would be the last time, because essentially we're taking from the fund balance every year as well for the last 7 years, correct?
No, actually, I think it was a year or two ago, we added a little bit to it. Once the final numbers came in, some was actually put back.
Okay, about 2 years ago,
Yes, ma'am.
when we first got in. All right, so if we were to go to the 3.8735, how is that going to affect us financially?
The 3.8735 would leave our fund balance at a total of 22.59%.
22.
Yes. So you'd
But
have
that-
you'd have 20%, and then you'd be about halfway towards the 5%.
Oh, I got you, 22.5, okay, I got you. All right, and then, the aquatic center, how much of the, millage increase is actually, wasn't it .1 or
About .176, if I remember the number right.
0.17? Okay, and so it's like $17.60 per 100,000,
If my .17 was correct, yes,
okay.
going off memory.
But then if we go below, well, we'll have 22 and a half, but we won't have anything extra to use through the year if something happens, right? Other than the 20% for absolute emergencies.
That's correct.
Was the increases, because I have a funny feeling that some people in certain specific areas got a bill that showed the increase in their value of their home.
As I can't hear up here.
The increase in their value of their home, and that's kind of affecting some of these numbers that people are worried about. So my concern is that, are we accounting for that increased value as well for next year? Because I mean, we're kind of, it's horrible how we have to do budget by state statute. We have to assume how much we're going to get in by next year, but then, and base a budget on an assumption, not necessarily correct and accurate numbers. So are we taking in consideration that the property values have gone up dramatically in certain areas?
Yes, ma'am. The numbers for the property values are based on this past January. So we got those numbers, we got preliminary numbers at the end of May, we got another set of numbers at the end of July. Between now and, typically those numbers don't move a whole lot. One of the biggest causes that cause them to move from this point forward, or when people appeal the valuation that the property appraiser did. So they can, if you disagreed with the property appraiser's value of your property, you can appeal it to the property appraiser in Sarasota. You could win, you could lose. I can tell you the city appealed one a few years ago and we won. That causes the revenue that the city receives to actually go down. So typically, like I say, from this point forward, the numbers go down, not up.
So we had those accurate, the new analysis of the evaluations, but when we did our July.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
we also had other numbers that came in more specific, correct?
Correct.
All right.
You know, we continually get numbers all the way through, typically about the 20th of July. And that's, as you'll notice, like I stated earlier, the maximum millage that was approved back in July was 4.2787. And as we got more refined numbers, that's why we brought it in at 4.2056. As some revenue sources went up, we lowered the tax rate.
So, let me ask you this. There was a few things that kind of twerked my ears during public comments. And one was the whole 5 resource officers, and why are we not utilizing the 5 resource officers in order to put those empty spots in? And can you explain that maybe?
Yes, we are utilizing those officers. They are being, the police chief is making them community policing officers. We did discuss that during the budget process. He gave you some good details of that program. If you'd like, we can call him up here and he can explain that. But those officers are being reutilized. They're not being just thrown out there. They're being allocated to do jobs in the city.
And just the final answer is how long does it take to train new officers? I mean, how long are they actually, we're not budgeting.
Officers in training for a full year before they're put out on the streets by themselves.
Thank you. Commissioner Luke, you have 3-minute follow-up. The floor is yours.
My first things were commission thing here I want to talk about, but I want to get out what the reserves are. We have 2 funds. One of them is a 20% reserve, so if a hurricane comes through and destroys everything, you've got 10 weeks to be able to ramp back up. That can't be touched, just like city manager said. Now, on top of that, though, this commission stated that there would be a stabilization fund. That is, we used something like that toward the body cams last year. The citizens wanted that. We found the monies. I mean, so those types of things can be used. Solid waste used theirs when China shut the door on recycling. And instead of it going to the taxpayer, that fund was used. Not touching that 20%, because that's a no-no. But it's touching that 5 to 10 stabilization that we as a committee put in place. So those are the reserves. What I am recommending is using, and go ahead and violate the policy that we put in place in order to take care of everything else but the staffing. The staffing is the service level that needs to be addressed. Future years, I already described how we had to get the city in place, and then we had to be able to serve West Village. And so now, in my eyes, when I'm seeing this culmination of what has occurred to get us on the right track, I feel as though we're finally on the right track, and the future years shouldn't be a repeat. Not at all. I'm thankful for the knowledge that's come, and some of these statements that have been made are wonderful. The police department, the ratio that they're dealing with per population is actually under than what is required, even with those new officers. The last thing that I'd like to say is when you see a county or a state, a governor or anybody, a president, at the beginning of their budget say, I want everything cut 3%. Well, you know who's still got to hold that bag? Is the local government. I mean, the county is keeping their, well, no, they're not going to be keeping theirs the same, but they are cutting the money to take care of our parks. So who's going to take care of the parks? We have to. So we have to look at that. That falls on the back then of the taxpayer here locally, because they're cutting it, making it look good on their end, but it falls to us. So that is the last statement, but I'm going to push my button to make a motion of that lower amount when it's Ready.
Commissioner McDowell, you have 3 minutes before we go.
Yeah, I forgot to ask a question of City Manager. One of our public commenters had mentioned, and I don't remember the exact number, but $523,000 the West Villages paid to the city in April.
I actually did not.
523.
We sent them an invoice, they challenged the invoice, we're going back and forth on it, and as soon as they do pay the ultimate invoice, which is the amount they agreed to in the principals agreement, to pay for 5 police officers, equipment, and miscellaneous costs, they will be reimbursed out of impact fees that have already been collected, so it'll end up being a wash. They're gonna write us a check, and we will write them a check. But because it comes out of 2 different funds, and there's a legal agreement in place, it has to go down that way, that they will write us a check, which we've invoiced them for, and then they'll send us an invoice, and we'll turn around, and as silly as that sounds, we get, due to the funding sources, that's the way we have to do it. So it's gonna be a wash.
So we're going to give them an invoice, they're going to pay the invoice, and then we're going to write them a check out of their little bucket labeled West Villages impact fees for the
Get the
police
money right
department. And then we're going to give it right back. Thank you for that clarification, because I think that statement needed to be corrected. So I appreciate that, City Manager. I recognize that bureaucracy has helped get us to where we are today.
Definitely.
The federal government gives mandates to the state. The state gives mandates to the county. The county gives mandates to us. And then we're left holding that back. So if you think that this is all of our desires to have a study to be able to lower the speed limit on a road, that's not us, folks. That's state statute. We're required to spend that money for a stupid study. This is stuff that we have to deal with on a regular basis. And the state are the ones that you probably need to talk to too. And then your federal government people, you need to talk to them too, and the county. So there are things that we are so handcuffed with that we have to do whether we like it or not. And unfortunately, we got to pass that on to somebody somehow, some way. So I still believe that there are ways to cut some of the spending. I have a list, commissioners, if you are interested in hearing some of the ideas that I have on cutting spending to lower this instead of touching our emergency fund. But that you'll have to ask for.
Commissioner Emmerich. Your son, you said you're good?
I'm willing to hear the list. And then this way we can make sure that it's on the record, whether we agree or disagree and the reasons why, and let's just go through this list so we make sure that it was heard.
Sounds good. Go ahead,
That'd be
Commissioner McDowell.
fine. Well, we have, and these are just, I'm not saying every single thing. This is just things that I wrote down. There's like 10 of them. We had about $870,000 in one-time expenditures that we're going to be doing this year.
What's that for?
For studies and stuff that we wanted to do, like I didn't label every single one, I just gave a dollar amount.
Well, that
There
definitely
was-
matters, though.
That means we can't make the decision. Okay.
Next one.
There's the code enforcement administrative and specialist, that's $43,000.
Hold on, code enforcement.
There's a telecommunications manager in IT. IT has 3 open positions. Of course they're falling behind. That doesn't mean you hire another manager. Hire the staff and the manager that's got positions already.
Communication managers was how much?
$67,000. There's IT has a Comcast service for putting Wi-Fi at the Morgan Center, $35,000. Dark fiber at Pan American, there's another $30,000. Officers, that's going to require a bigger conversation. There's 4 of those. Fitness equipment, that's $49,000. There's a groundskeeper in Parks and Rec for $70,000, including the equipment. Business manager for the EMS and fire, and I know fire we can't touch because that's a different thing, but the EMS portion of it's $35,000. Then there's the medical insurance for the self-insurance fund. We didn't want to reduce the self-insurance fund for the medical insurance by 2%. Instead of putting 4% in, I suggested splitting it to the 2% this year and then 2% again next year. That'll save us another $80,000. There's the Sarasota County EDC Corporation contract. There's another $73,000. Travel, city, the general budget, travel and per diem, and that's including commissions, is almost $500,000. Do we need to have all of that? Some of that may be essential, some of that may not. I don't know that. That's going to require a bigger conversation. All of these new hires that are being proposed have a start date of January 1st. Push that start date out until April, or maybe just don't hire them. That's where I'm at. It's on
Okay.
the record.
Mr. Carson.
So this travel, how much of it is this as the commission's budget? We want to make that very clear so people don't go out there spreading rumors that we're using $500,000 of taxpayers' money.
It's, I said, the general budget. Oh.
That isn't what's going to get out there. So that's why I want to make sure it's clear.
About $45,000, $46,000. And that's us advocating for you guys when we go to Washington and the state and saying, hey, stop it, stop giving us all these things
And that also,
that we have to pay
that also
for.
includes the classes.
The
and those
classes
things
and
that
stuff,
we have
right.
to take.
Right.
Required education.
But, and again, it's a suggestion that would require a larger conversation to determine what is absolutely necessary, because, yeah, I'm sure the police department's sitting there going, holy crap, we have to do training. So they're included in that number, but it's a conversation that it should be had.
Okay, so I'm okay with getting rid of the code enforcement specialist. I don't have a problem with that. I didn't think that there was any new positions in building. I thought that there was going to be some new, what do you call, inspectors in there. I thought that's what the proposal was.
With utilizing the fund, though,
Oh, that's right, it doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're
It's
right.
taking, everything she just named would be taken care of out of that so-called slush fund. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
already taken care of.
Yeah,
It's
we
a
can't
it's a growing city that needs to be caught up on, and using what we claimed is the wiggle room, so you still can continue, but everything she named can be paid for out of that fund that we.
Yeah, but the code enforcement specialist would come out of the building fund, which doesn't even impact the city's ad valorem, so that's not gonna work.
The code enforcement comes out of the general fund.
Thank you.
Okay, so that 43,000, you take that out, we're gonna reduce it by what?
A .001?
That'll save a nickel.
But it's the totality that I was looking at.
So the 870 in one-time expenditures, I'm going to assume that most of that are studies that are required in order for us to do things like expand road and, or do our drainage programs and the activity center
To do that?
out there was, how much is that? Do you have something to say? What'd you say, Commissioner?
I'm getting the number for you.
Oh, I thought you said that you knew. 870,000, that, I would assume that's the east end.
Counts, it includes the computer replacements in the general fund, because those are one-time expenditures.
Okay.
So the majority of that 870,000, 672 of it is minor operating equipment.
Operating equipment.
How much is it?
$72,730 of that is minor operating equipment. It includes computers, phones, tablets. Like I said, it's equipment. $59,000 for the special response.
There was a lot for PD.
But I can't hear until we
Guys, we
got
can't
everybody
hear.
leaving here.
Can you say that again, Mr. Lear?
Yes, sir. Take me just a second to get back to it.
$672.
$672,730 of that $870,000 one-time equipment, one-time expenditures relates to minor operating equipment.
Mayor, if I can just save the board some time. These are things that I brought up during the workshop. And these are things that I still feel that could be cut. And, I just gave a quick overview of items And I know the 870 in one-time expenses, I didn't go item by item, line by line. Same thing with the travel. I just took the whole number to see if you guys wanted to have a larger conversation. If that's not the will of the board,
Well,
Well, the conversation's right here.
I'm trying to have the conversation, so 672,730 minor equipment, is that based off of the requirement to replace phones and computers at a certain time
Every
frame?
5 years.
Every 5 years?
Yes, ma'am. Changed it several years back from 3 years to 5 years to make them last longer.
You did.
To try to reduce it.
Okay,
Again, I'm going to state.
yeah, I know.
All of that can be covered with what I was talking about, and the forward motion can still go ahead. Nope, there's not going to be a slush fund for the commission to play around with, but so what? It's lowering the amount, and it's keeping it only to the growth that come within the personnel. And to me, that's the fair thing to do.
if I may, Mayor. I don't quite understand what you're saying, this would be covered in, what, I don't understand what you mean by this would be covered in whatever you were saying before.
Because I was talking about going to the rollback, that 3.2.
3.2.
Exactly. You add the millage of what it would cost because of what we have done as a board for the staff, getting the city where it needs to be to function, kind of back to where it was in the early 2000s. Everything else can fit within that, and you still end up having a 2.59% within that stability.
So what's it fitting into?
What she means is that instead of having 5% of the available fund balance for your stabilization, you would go to a 2.5 of the percentage.
Now I
You'd
get it.
reduce it. Get it?
And it's not touching the 20%
Right.
that has to stay there for bonding or whatever else that might come up, or the hurricane come blow everything away. It's not touching
got
that. It's touching. And to say that I'm going to leave 5% or more in a sustainability and cut the progress of the city instead, when that 5% sits there and should be used in order to lower it,
No, you're
should be
right.
done.
Mr. Emmerich.
Yeah, Commissioner, or Vice Mayor McDowell brought up a good point earlier, and it was something that I had asked the city manager about the other day. It was about the implementation of the new hires, especially the police and everything like that. And I had, especially for West Villages, I had asked them, do they have to come on October 1st? We have 4. Can 2 of them be held off till April? And he says, well, we've already done that. All 4 will not be starting till April. So in that essence, it saved 2 full salaries for the next year's, throughout this year to next year's budget by hiring all 4 in April, rather than hiring all 4 October 1.
So that,
So we have looked into that on new hires.
Commissioner McDowell.
so that means next year, those 4 employees are going to have 100% in salary benefits and everything,
Yes.
instead of a half a year.
Yeah,
So
but
we're not,
you still need them, though.
That's where the
Yeah.
balance of what you bring in has to stay in line.
Yeah.
But this year, you're getting
Guys, I
to where
can't
you
hear.
need to be in order to have the level of service for all of the city and not leaving them underserved. I'm
Correct.
tired of them not being served the way that the rest of the city is being served. They're part of us, we embrace one another. So it needs to be done, that same quality needs to be there. And so you get it to the point where you can then balance it. And, I mean, we've cut it before. If you find out next year you can cut it, you cut it.
Right.
But we'll at least be in a place where we can be balanced. And this year, with what I'm recommending, it's only putting on the back the level of service that's come over the last 2 years for personnel, period. This is even taking care of the pool, the deficit of the pool. And I think you all know how I felt about that one.
City manager, how does that affect, like whenever we're looking at bond ratings or we get evaluated, these things?
Well, they
Because
look
we
at
do
it.
have Price Boulevard that we're probably going to need a bond on.
Price Boulevard is estimated to be about $40 million.
Police station that we're currently a decade behind on, that we're going to probably need a bond on.
At the end of the day,
And infrastructure, lift stations.
the rating agencies look at your budget year over year. They look at your history. Back when back in about 2012 or 13, when we had been spending down reserves year after year, which keep in mind, we did have extremely excessive reserves at that point in time, but we did have a plan to spend them down. But the fact that we had multiple years in a row of spending reserves, they did reduce our bond rating. We got to a point where we were balancing the budget, not using reserves for recurring expenditures year over year, and they actually increased our bond rating back, took it from a single A to a double A bond rating. So we got our rate increased. If we do not follow our own bond policy, or we continue to spend reserves to balance the budget for operating costs, they will reduce our bond rating.
And how long have we done that?
For the last 3 years, we've only used reserves for one-time expenditures. We have had a structurally balanced budget for the last several years. This would, depending on what the commission does tonight, if we use money for recurring expenditures to balance this budget, then this would be year one. It'd be the first time in, I think, 3 or 4 years that we've done that.
But theoretically, if you look at the numbers that were just given by Commissioner McDowell, for instance, the 870,000 of one-time expenditures, it falls in line with what Commissioner Luke is saying, basically.
That's what I said, it depends on what
right?
you all do tonight. If you use the 870, there'll be two things that they'll look at. One is they were only for one-time expenditures. That's a plus, because again, you'll still be able to say that you've not used it for recurring expenditures. The downside is you'll be below your bond policy, your fund balance policy.
Right.
And I will tell you, just so you're all aware, the fund balance policy tells you flat out what you have to do when that happens. And it says if you're below that 5%, that you have to replace it in the following year.
No matter what.
Or be in violation of it again. So what I will tell you up front is, I have to follow this policy. You all can waive it, I cannot. So you guys gave me a policy, when I bring you a budget, it has to be within all of your policies. So if that requires me next year to put money into fund balance, I will have to budget for that. Again, just like this year, you guys can say, no, I don't want to do that. I cannot. So that's where we'll be.
Commissioner Goodell.
I got a question about this 5 to 10% stabilization economic fund. When the steel tariffs went up, that's what this would be used for. If that happened this year, this would be an example of how that would be stabilization.
So just so you have all of the information, I'll read to you what the resolution for fund balance states. It says the city's financial reserves policy acts to mitigate other forms of uncertainty, such as changes in the tax and spending policies of the federal and state governments, imposition of mandates by federal and state governments or the courts, financial impacts of local agreements, particularly those stemming from collective bargaining, repairs and replacements of the city's aging infrastructure, unforeseen increases in energy costs. So that's what it states. Ultimately, yes, an increase, steel tariffs would be one of those things. If you guys negotiate new union contracts, which we'll be doing next year.
Next year or this year?
This upcoming May,
Okay.
we start negotiating, well,
This fiscal year.
the
Gotcha.
unions can request it as early as May. We can request it earlier, which we will, because sometimes these things take a while to get done, and we prefer to have them done before the end of the year. So yes, those are the things it can be used for. The next line states that if you go below there, you must replace it in the next year. So that's the situation we're in.
Thank you.
So it sounds like to me, if you're looking at a compromise, Commissioner Luke has the best compromise that we can look at. I mean, if that's what you're looking at doing. So.
That's only a six point, what is the increase from the 3.4?
It's less than 5. It's a 0.4 something.
0.4, blah, blah, blah.
The millage rate Commissioner Luke recommended or stated was 3.8735, which would put you halfway, be at 2.59 of the 5%. You will be able to still say you've got a structurally balanced budget because you will have only used reserves for one-time expenditures. So you won't violate that provision. and next year you'll just have to make it up. Now, keep in mind, some of the ways that gets made up is budgeting for revenue increases, finding expenditure cuts, or, savings throughout the year. We don't spend all the money we budget. You've heard me say many times, we won't spend more than you budget. The only way we can do that is by the commission themselves saying, hey, we want to add something else to the budget. We did that twice this year.
Okay, Commissioner Luke, you have a motion, I believe?
To approve ordinance number 2019-40, lowering the millage and using the millage rate of 3.8735, utilizing the stabilization reserve fund for the one-time expenditures.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Luke, seconded by Commissioner Emmerich. Commissioner Luke, do you have anything to that you'd like to say?
All I can say is I think this gets us to a place where we can be balanced for the future. But when we get into the budgets next year, well, first of all, we better be in strategic planning before we get into budget next year so that this type of stuff can be discussed. But we can change that policy. We don't have to say a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 10, because if it's 10, it's got to be given back. But you can change it to say up to 10, and then you're not violating when you only have 1 or 2% into it also. Thank you.
Commissioner Emmerich? do you have anything?
The only thing I got to add to that is that policy, I believe it reads should and not must.
Exactly. It
So,
does not
yes,
say must.
We can work
Says
on it, and
should.
we can tweak that policy to where we can bring that down and do a lot more better on the balance of the budget. So, that's all I have, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Carrison.
Well, I am just in shock and awe. I thank you all for this because I could have sworn this is what I proposed the last time, was to use the money to pay for the one-time fees, and then I don't know where we went awry. Just like the whole ordinance change for the fund balance policy. I hope that we get this fund balance policy taken care of. I really do, because I know that we need to be at a consistent basis. We cannot keep pulling from it and going going underneath what our policy states. We've got to get something that's meanable and pliable, and something that can sit there for a while so that we're okay. Not only that, but just for the record, we do have extra policies that do take into consideration of making sure that we have infrastructure funds and money funds we have some capital acquisition funds sitting here, and we have some general government impact fees that can go towards that police department. So we have some other ways to do one-time expenses. But whatever's left over is what this is for. And I thank you, Commissioner Luke, because maybe I was speaking French 2 weeks ago. I don't know.
I think the numbers came out a little bit different.
They came out different, but I saw robbing Peter to pay Paul last time. Did I read or make that motion properly so that?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, it
Okay.
will allow
All right.
us to do what we need to do.
Just wanted to make sure by putting that term in there that I wasn't messing something up. Thank you.
No? Okay, all right. All right, let's take the vote. And that passes 3-2 with Vice Mayor and Mayor dissenting.
Matt?
Yep, absolutely.
So while I'm grateful that it is lower, and I would have liked to have supported the lower amount that was compared to the last meeting that we had, I can't in my heart jeopardize this emergency fund. We don't know what's going to happen in the next year. I don't have a crystal ball. Yes, we have the 20%, but that's only leaving us a small amount in case of something else that comes up. And there can't be any budget amendments. There can't be any increases in anything. And that scares the bejeebers out of me if we needed that money. So the purpose of that fund was to protect us. I still say we can cut spending. I still say we don't need to hire all these employees, but that's just me. So that's the reason why I dissented.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. All right, moving on to ordinance number 2019-41. City Clerk, please read ordinance by title only.
Did you want to state why you?
An ordinance of the City of Northport, Florida, adopting a non-district budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019, and ending on September 30, 2020, adopting the capital improvement budget and program, prescribing the terms, conditions, and provisions with respect to the items of appropriation and their payment, providing for supplemental appropriations and reappropriations, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. City Manager, please present the item.
This is the actual budget for the non-district budget, which includes the capital improvement program. One thing I will tell you all is we need to make, you cannot adopt this at this point as is for second reading because you changed the millage rate in the first one. So I would need that your motion would be that this ordinance be adopted with the updated millage rate and necessary changes be made as required. Assuming you're going to adopt it as the rest as is.
Right. Okay. Do I have anybody to this? I'll entertain the motion.
I'll move to approve ordinance number 2019-41 with the millage rate being applied that was voted in the previous ordinance and any adjustments that need to follow in suit for that.
I have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Luke, seconded by Commissioner Emmerich. Commissioner Luke, do you have anything to that? Commissioner Emmerich? No. All right, let us take the vote. And that passes 4-1 with Commissioner McDowell dissenting. Commissioner McDowell?
Didn't approve the millage rate, I can't approve the budget.
Yeah, I'm approving this because we now have a millage rate, and I want to make sure that everybody's taken care of with the appropriate millage that the board has approved. All right. Let's see, so I have some more public comment, Vice Mayor, I believe, for the very end. I had two. Mr. Dobrin and Mr. Shaughnessy.
It's a very sad day in the history of the city. Victor Dobrin, Real Circle, Northport. It's a very sad day in the city history to see this such high increase pass without delivering at the minimum of your fiduciary duty. I don't want to hear from now on from any commissioner who wants to be on this dais that we have to increase services and so forth. They are empty words. We are paying for services in many ways, and one of them being the impact fees. And John Missel met, and I appreciate that you invited me to talk to you, Mr. Lear. But for example, in the books of the proposal is not accounted for the impact fees. Mr. Lear gave me last year, for 2 years, the summary which we pay just from the West Villages, you're 2 million. And this year will be more than 1.5 million. Those can be used. And by the way, they can be used towards certain capital like cars and so forth. You recognize that. But there is another observation. The 5 police officers which were taken from the school security, you added in the head count another 5. It was not replenishing the position which you stated today. And that was confirmed because John Missel came to meet with you in my absence. So let's be honest. Let's not continue to mislead the people of Northport. But what you did, you raided the fund, and I have not a problem to use it maybe as a one-time use, but we don't have a plan. You didn't attack any of the issues the city has today. You conveniently sat there and tell me that nobody got a raise and you have this service. That's not right. And believe me, we don't forget. Next year will be an election year, and if any of you want to leave that spot, I will run it today. I will serve the city for $0. Zero. But that's the leadership. That's what we need. One of the city citizens said that we should use the retiree. I will serve the city full time without pay. So take your job seriously. You cannot continue to have aspiration to lead the county when you cannot manage a budget. So please take this a very strong signal that this is not the right thing what you did tonight, robbing us, robbing our fund, reserve fund, and not doing anything what was responsible. Clearly, you have no competence to stay there.
We're done. Meeting adjourned. All right.
Sorry.
Good evening. Glad to see you guys here tonight. We are going to move on to our Fire Rescue District Special Meeting. Today's Thursday, September 19th, 2019. It is 8:10 p.m. We're in the city chambers, and I call this meeting to order. Those present with me are Commissioner Luke, Vice Mayor McDowell, myself, Mayor Hanks, Commissioner Carrison, Commissioner Emmerich, City Manager Lear, Assistant City Attorney Golan, Deputy Clerk Taylor, and our Recording Secretary, Ms. Goodman. We have Fire Chief Titus back there. We have our Police Chief, Garrison, also with us. We've said the pledge, so we're going to move on to the approval of the agenda.
So moved, Mayor. I'll second.
I have a motion on the floor by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Luke. Let's take the vote. That passes unanimously. We're going to move on to public comment. I have 2 public comment cards here. As of now, we're no longer taking public comment until the end. So if you want to give another public comment, you can do it after the meeting. Mr. Shaughnessy first, and then Deborah Coco.
May I ask a question,
Please
Mayor?
state your name. Yes, ma'am.
I mean, he had a general comment for the last meeting
I've
that
already
you...
talked to him.
This covers it?
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thank you.
Just state your name for the record, sir.
Kevin Shaughnessy, Grand Paradiso. Just to wrap up, I guess some of the themes I heard tonight from the audience, 2 of the main themes I heard were surprise, extreme surprise and dismay about the rate increase, and the other is the fixed income situation that a good majority of the residents are stuck with, unfortunately. And speaking of surprise, I was very surprised and somewhat dismayed that some of the conversations had here tonight were not had prior to this meeting. We had a meeting on the 5th. You've had 14 days behind closed doors to have some of the conversations that were had up here tonight going back and forth on numbers. That should have been done before you got here. That should have been part of your workshops. Because at the end of the day, we went right back to the prior meeting with a slight difference in the rate, a 3.9 something versus a 3.8 something, and going after the reserves. I didn't hear anything about any other cuts. And I'm hoping that you're going to consider that as part of your day-to-day operations, City Manager and Commissioners, to look at other opportunities to lessen the impact of the reserves. So that takes the reserve consideration off the table. But now it's all you have, so that's what you're going to give us, to lower the rate to the point that you did. But at the end of the day, I think you're still leaving on the table opportunities to further reduce the expenses that you haven't looked at. And I'd like to ensure that you do that. Going forward, you continue to start to look into the operations. And there were a couple of items I wasn't clear on. There was the 20% plus 5% plus, or 10%. Is it 25% or is it 30%? Is it 20 plus 10 or is it 20 plus 5 plus 5? What's the number?
We can get with you with staff after.
Okay. And the other was the conversation around the 5 law enforcement officers that were moving from the school system into other jobs within the police department. Was that existing projects, or was that a new project that we moved those 5 guys into, rather than moving them into the 4 open slots on the West Villages? Because that was unclear.
That'll be another staff we'll do.
Okay? And then the conversation around the principals agreement with the West Villages. We need to wrap that one up, folks. That thing's been sitting around here. It's got more hair on it than I have. Right? and there's a lot of considerations in that principal agreement. I mean, you're talking bucks in that thing, right? There was 500,000 just around, or 400, whatever the number was, 500,000 for the police cars, right? And it's funny money. We give you money, you get money back, all that nonsense, right? But at the end of the day, there are other activities in that have budget impact. And we need to understand that. There was a $2 million number floating around the park. I don't know whether that's been ironed out and where we stand on that. But I think we need to get our act together, get that nailed, and get it put to bed and understand the budget implications. As to the West Villages, I had asked in the last meeting...
Thank you, Mr. Shaughnessy.
You owe me an answer from the last meeting on where the money that's coming in from the West Villages and what's going back in services.
Ms. Deborah Coco.
Thank you.
After the public comment.
Okay. Oh, thanks, Dave.
Hi, I'm Deborah Coco. I live in Island Walk, and I love living here, as long as I can afford it. So the tax implications do impact many of us in a negative fashion. But Mr. Emrich made a comment that I couldn't ignore, and it goes to some of the budget cuts that Ms. McDowell tried to throw out on the floor, and I agree with the gentleman before me. It would have been nice for those ideas to have been discussed beforehand. But when you said that you're opening an aquatic park and you don't know what it's going to make, I was a business owner, and I had to project to my financial institution to get a business as to what my income was going to be in order to pay my debt to the financial institution to build that business. How you do not know what your aquatic park is going to make, shame on you for building it to begin with if you didn't think it would pay for itself. So I think that just echoes a lot of sentiment around budget and the planning of budget. If you can't afford it, or if you don't know if it's going to make money, then don't build it. And so that's where we'd like to see monies come from in these added expenditures as opposed to the safety funds. So I do think you do have other opportunities before you touch those reserves. And I hope you look at them. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, we're going to move on. Commissioner McDowell had one comment.
Yeah, I just want to clear something up based on what one of the public commenters had said, that we met behind closed doors. That is illegal. We never can do that, never will be able to do that. All of our meetings as a board during the workshops were held at a publicly noticed meeting. Public was invited to attend. Whatever reasons, I know life gets in the way.
I think you misconstrued my statement. What I meant was, you
And
could have
then
done
the
that
other-
homework before tonight.
The other thing is when the other citizen had said the ideas that I had presented here, I did also present those at the workshop. So I was just reiterating them again, hoping that this time might get a little bit more leverage.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to ordinance number 2019-42. City clerk, please read ordinance by title only.
An ordinance of the City of Northport, Florida, adopting a fire rescue district budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019, and ending on September 30th, 2020, prescribing the terms, conditions, and provisions with respect to the items of appropriation and their payment, providing for supplemental appropriations and reappropriations, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, and providing an effective date.
City manager, please present the item.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the budget for the Fire Rescue District. The rate resolution was adopted at the last meeting, so that's a one reading, so it's done. The one thing that I will tell you is we do need to, if you adopt this budget, you do need to make a change to Exhibit A. So because you changed the millage rate, even though the millage does not affect the districts, it is written in the exhibits to the budget. So when a motion is made, the motion will need to state, to adopt the ordinance with changes made based on the millage that was adopted earlier tonight.
All right. Thank you. I see no speakers, so I'll take a motion.
I move to approve ordinance number 2019-42, adjusting Exhibit A to reflect the new millage rate just approved.
Second.
Motion on the floor by Commissioner Loop, seconded by Commissioner Carrasone. Commissioner Loop?
No, this has it match, and this is just the budget that matches what was approved last time. Thank
Commissioner
you.
Carrasone, you have anything to it? All right. All right, let's take the vote. Vote carries 4-1 with Commissioner McDowell dissenting for.
I couldn't approve the assessment rate, so I can't approve the budget, so thank you.
I will again restate my voting down of the budget. My voting for this is in reflection because I want to make sure that we are capitalizing on what the board has agreed to do. All right. I have no other public comment, so this meeting is adjourned. Ms. Taylor. All right.
Another meeting.
Good,
Got another one.
good evening. We are in our Road and Drainage District Special Meeting. Today is Thursday, September 19, 2019. It is 8:20 p.m., and we are in the chambers. And I call this meeting to order. Those present with me are Commissioner Luke, Vice Mayor McDowell, Mayor Hanks, Commissioner Carrasone, Commissioner Emmerich, City Manager Lear, Assistant City Attorney Golan, Deputy City Clerk Taylor, Recording Secretary Goodman, and Fire Chief Titus, and Police Chief Garrison. Another couple of reminders, please cell phones off. You guys know the drill. We'll put them on silent. We've said the Pledge of Allegiance, so I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
So moved, Mayor.
Have a motion on the floor by Vice Mayor McDowell, seconded by Commissioner Carrasone. Let's take a vote.
Can't push a button.
And that passes unanimously. Do I have any public comment? No public comments. We want to move on to ordinance number 2019-43. City Clerk, please read ordinance by title only.
An ordinance of the City of Northport, Florida, adopting a road and drainage district budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019, and ending on September 30th, 2020, prescribing the terms, conditions, and provisions with respect to the items of appropriation and their payment, providing for supplemental appropriations and reappropriations, providing for severability, providing for conflicts, and providing an effective date.
Thank you, ma'am. City Manager, please present the item.
Thank you, Mayor. As I stated at the last one, the rate resolution has already been adopted. This is the actual budget for the Road and Drainage District. Again, if you do not have any changes to this, the amendment that will, or the motion needs to state that to adopt the millage rate, change the millage rate in Exhibit A as was discussed at earlier tonight's meeting.
Okay, thank you. I believe Commissioner Carrasone's having a hard time with her.
Yeah. Did you go out and come back in?
I did.
Okay, thank you. Looks like I have nothing.
No public comment, Mayor.
No public comment. So I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve ordinance number 2019-43, adjusting Exhibit A to reflect the new millage rate.
Motion on the floor by Commissioner Luke.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Emmerich. For reasons stated, do you have anything to say to that?
The last district meeting.
Commissioner Emmerich? All right.
I'm thinking Commissioner Yates gave me her bad juju with technology up here when she left. I'm pretty certain of it.
I really think you brought
Actually-
your own.
That was my chair, and I had no problems.
I don't think that was her chair.
That was mine.
Passed it on.
All right.
The only one she didn't
Looks
say.
like it's working. Let's take the vote.
Okay, thank you. Jeez.
Just stay there, sir.
Yeah, just stay here.
And that vote carries 4-1 with Commissioner McDowell dissenting.
Same reasons, Mayor.
Same reason, and I voted yes for the same reason, to make sure we maximize what was done. I have no other public comments, so this meeting is adjourned. I'll be ready when you are, Ms. Taylor.
I gotta get out.
Wow, that put me right straight into it.
To put me right.
Good evening. Today is Thursday, September 19th, 2019. It is 8:24 p.m. We're in the city chambers. I call the Solid Waste District Special Meeting to order. Those present with me are Commissioner Luke, Vice Mayor McDowell, myself, Mayor Hanks, Commissioner Carrasone, Commissioner Emmerich, City Manager Lear, City Attorney, Assistant City Attorney Golan, Deputy City Clerk Taylor, and Recording Secretary Goodman, with Fire Chief Titus back there and Police Chief Garrison also joining us. We've already said the Pledge of Allegiance, so I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Oh, so moved, Mayor. Sorry.
I'll second that.
Motion on the floor by the Vice Mayor, seconded by Commissioner Luke. Let's take the vote.
Thing for that cheat sheet.
That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to public hearing, ordinance number 2019-44. City Clerk, please read ordinance by title only, as I do not have public comment, correct?
No public comment.
An ordinance of the City of Northport, Florida, adopting a solid waste district budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2019, and ending on September 30th, 2020, prescribing the terms, conditions, and provisions with respect to the items of appropriation and their payment, providing for supplemental appropriations and reappropriations, providing for severability, and providing an effective date.
Thank you. City Manager, please present the item.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, this one is the Solid Waste District's budget. The rate resolution was adopted at the last meeting. And if you have no changes to this, you just need to make sure that when you make the motion, you make the motion to adopt with the changed millage rate from earlier tonight.
Thank you. I see no comments, so I'll entertain the motion.
I move to approve ordinance number 2019-44, adjusting Exhibit A to reflect the new millage rate.
Second.
Motion on the floor by Commissioner Luke, seconded by Commissioner McDowell. If there's nothing to be said, I'll entertain the vote.
Entertain the vote.
And that passes unanimously. Now, would you like to say why you changed your vote or no?
Yeah, because
This one's different.
this one's
Right,
different.
okay.
This
I
one's
just want to make sure the
completely
public
different.
understands.
I appreciated solid waste working with us and lowering their assessment and working during the budget time, and that's why I voted for it.
Figured not everybody understands that,
Gotcha.
and I figured you would want that to be
I
said.
appreciate that,
Oh,
Mayor, thank you.
Frankie's king, isn't he?
Well, he has a nice, shiny, well,
Shiny back there.
And red.
well, it's just the top of his head is turning red now. All right, no public comment?
Nothing, Mayor.
With that, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
And that is the last meeting of the evening.